Gary Oldman, a name whispered with reverence across stages and studios, carved into the heart of cinema through roles so fierce, so transformative, that audiences often forgot the man behind the mask. Academy Award winner, master of metamorphosis, Hollywood's greatest chameleon. But behind the brilliance lies a story not painted in gold, but in shadows. A childhood scarred by abandonment, a young artist moulded in poverty, a man who nearly drowned in addiction, a father who fought for his children, an actor who walked through fire before he ever saw a spotlight. This is the story of a man who transformed broken beginnings into mastery, who built artistry from pain, discipline from chaos, and legacy from the ashes of his past. If you believe Gary Oldman is one of the greatest actors in modern history, tap like, because what you're about to hear is the story behind the brilliance, not the performances, but the heartbreak that forged them. Chapter 1. The Boy in the Shadows, March 21st, 1958, New Cross, South London. Inside a cramped home wrapped in silence and struggle, Gary Leonard Oldman entered a world already cracked. His father, Leonard, was a former sailor and alcoholic, a man whose warmth flickered between fleeting tenderness and unpredictable storms. His mother, Kathleen, held the family together through strength, patience, and prayers whispered through exhaustion. When Gary was barely 7, his father walked out and never returned. For a child, abandonment isn't an event. It becomes a shadow, one that follows for decades. Gary grew up quickly, carrying responsibilities bigger than his hands, dreams heavier than his reality. He wasn't the top student. He wasn't the loudest voice. He didn't shine. Not yet. He swept factory floors, worked in sports shops, did anything to help his mother. But at night, he'd sit alone watching actors on television slip into other skins, become other people, escape their pain. And a quiet desire formed inside him. Maybe I can escape too. Chapter 2. A door closes, another opens. At 16, Gary Oldman dropped out of school. Teachers told him he'd never achieve much. Life seemed to agree. But fate doesn't shout. It whispers. One evening, he walked into a local cinema and watched Malcolm McDowell's performance in The Raging Moon. Something inside him cracked open. He left the theatre trembling, as if he'd glimpsed the person he was meant to be. From that day, he hunted acting with a hunger born from emptiness. Drama school auditions. He was rejected. One school even told him, "You don't have what it takes to be an actor." But Gary didn't break. He bent. He sharpened. He worked. He practiced in mirrors. He mimicked voices on buses. He devoured books on method acting. Rejection wasn't a wall, it was fuel. And in 1979, after years of obscurity, he was accepted into Rose Bruford College, a school that would shape him not with praise, but with discipline. Chapter 3. The Rise of a Chameleon. The 1980s weren't kind to many actors, but they crowned Gary Oldman. He erupted onto the stage with performances so raw that critics struggled to describe him. Intensity, electricity, danger, these were the words they used. His breakthrough came with Sid and Nancy in 1986, where he became Sid Vicious with such frightening authenticity that people whispered, "That's not acting, that's possession." Then came, "Prick up your ears." Then, "Rosencrantz and Guildenstern are dead," Hollywood noticed. And the man from South London, who once scrubbed floors, was suddenly on the brink of cinematic domination. Yet inside, a storm brewed. The kind of storm that comes when childhood wounds meet grown-up pressure. Chapter 4. The Cost of Transformation. By the early 1990s, Gary Oldman was everywhere, terrorizing in Bram Stoker's Dracula, explosive in True Romance, unhinged in Léon the Professional, mesmerizing in The Fifth Element. Every role demanded total surrender, new voices, new faces, new souls. But the deeper he dove into characters, the further he drifted from himself. To silence the noise, to coat the fractures inside him, Gary turned to alcohol, not casually, not occasionally, but desperately. There were nights when the bottle was his only companion, mornings when regret hung heavier than exhaustion. On the outside, he was a rising Hollywood titan. On the inside, he was losing himself. His first marriage crumbled, then his second. Then came the public custody battle, a chapter marked by pain, accusations, and a spotlight that magnified everything. Gary rarely speaks of that period in detail, not out of avoidance, but out of respect. Respect for his children, respect for the complexities of the past, respect for wounds better carried quietly. But what is known is that he fought hard to be a father, to rebuild stability, to protect what mattered most. And beneath all the noise, one truth echoed louder than the rest. He needed to change. Chapter 5. The Reckoning. In 1995, Gary Oldman hit a wall, the kind of wall men hit only once, before their lives change forever. He entered rehab, faced the mirror, faced himself, faced the shadow of a father he barely knew, but feared he was becoming. Sobriety didn't arrive like triumph. It arrived like surrender, a slow rebuilding, a fight measured not in days, but in breaths. He threw himself into fatherhood, into healing, into work that demanded clarity, and, slowly, the man once defined by extremes began to stabilize, not perfectly, not instantly, but with intention. Chapter 6. The quiet years of survival. Through the early 2000s, Gary remained respected, but Hollywood, with its relentless desire for the new, moved on. Roles shrank, budgets shrank, the spotlight dimmed. He wasn't the center of the storm anymore. He was the man navigating its aftermath. He accepted supporting roles, smaller roles, roles that paid the bills but didn't feed the soul. But Gary Oldman never stopped preparing, never stopped honing, never stopped sharpening the blade. The world assumed he was fading, but he was, in truth, rebuilding, in silence, in patience, in discipline. Chapter 7. The Phoenix Returns. Then came a trilogy that resurrected him. Commissioner Gordon, the Dark Knight trilogy. He didn't scream. He didn't explode. He didn't steal scenes. He grounded them, anchored them, humanized them. Audiences remembered, oh, that's Gary Oldman. Directors remembered too. Then came Tinker Tailor Soldier Spy in 2011, a performance of such quiet, devastating mastery that his peers declared, no one else alive could have done this. But destiny had one more crown for him. In 2017, Gary stepped into the skin of Winston Churchill for Darkest Hour. He sat for hours beneath layers of prosthetics, sweat pooling around his collar, breath short, body aching. He studied Churchill's cadence, his posture, his fear, his fire. And when the cameras rolled, Gary Oldman didn't play Churchill. He became him. The performance shook Hollywood. Audiences cried. Critics bowed. And on March the 4th, 2018, Gary Oldman won the Academy Award for Best Actor, a moment he once believed belonged to other men, not boys from broken homes, not dropouts from South London, not survivors of addiction. But there he was, standing on the world's biggest stage, holding the industry's highest honor, proving that greatness doesn't come from charm or luck, but from endurance. Chapter 8. Love, Peace and Second Chances. After years of turbulence, years of rebuilding, years of searching, Gary Oldman found a love not built on drama, but on steadiness. In 2017, he married writer and art curator Giselle Schmidt, a woman who saw the artist, the father, the human, not the headlines. Their marriage, quiet and grounded, became the sanctuary he had been seeking for decades. His relationships with his children deepened, stabilized. He showed up, listened, healed. Today, Gary Oldman carries himself with a calmness that feels earned, the calmness of a man who has walked through fire and come out shaped, not destroyed. Chapter 9. The Man Behind the Transformations. At 66 years old, Gary Oldman stands as a titan of his craft, not because he was flawless, but because he was courageous enough to confront the parts of himself that weren't. His performances span decades, genres, eras. But the truest measure of his greatness is not the roles he played, but the man he became after the cameras stopped rolling. He built a life out of broken pieces. He grew from wounds he never asked for. He rose after storms that could have ended him. And he learned slowly that the most powerful transformation is not the one on screen, but the one inside. Chapter 10. Legacy of a Survivor, Artist, and Man. Today, Gary Oldman is more than an actor. He is a living testament to what a human spirit can endure and become. A boy abandoned by his father, a young man who almost lost himself, a father who fought to rebuild, a performer who reshaped cinema, a survivor who rose again and again and again. His brilliance taught the world that talent is a gift, but endurance is a choice. His story reminds us that our pasts do not have the final word, that discipline can follow devastation, that peace can follow pain, that redemption is possible even after the darkest hour. So, if this story moved you, tap like as a tribute to the fire within him, a fire that refused to die even when life tried to extinguish it. And may Gary Oldman's journey remind you of your own strength, the strength to rise from wherever you are, to rebuild from whatever has broken, to believe that your next chapter can be your greatest. Because sometimes the people who transform most on screen are the ones who had to transform the most in life.